Hi everyone. This video is intended for my Crim 103 and Crim 210 students. So if you are a student in another class, make sure you check with your instructor to verify some of the policies and procedures that I discuss in this little overview because different instructors might have different policies or philosophies regarding the use of AI. So I'm making this video for fall 2025 semester here at SFU. If this is a different semester than that, just make sure you check with me about whether these policies continue and these philosophies and procedures continue because AI is changing, we learn new things, and philosophies and policies might change over time as well. The purpose of this little kind of talk is to just sort of give an overview of how I think students can use AI to complete course assignments both effectively and ethically in Crim 103 and Crim 210. So generally speaking, one of the philosophies that I have about AI coursework is that it's very difficult to prove that a student plagiarized their paper using ChatGPT or other software. So I'll regularly refer to ChatGPT just because that's one of the more common AI programs. But this sort of when I talk about AI or ChatGPT, I'm also including things like Copilot or Google AI or Grammarly or anything that you might use. So I know that it can be quite difficult to prove that a student plagiarized their paper using ChatGPT, but I also want to let students know to keep in mind that SFU determines plagiarism using the balance of probabilities standard. So it's not actually necessary for anyone to need to prove that you use ChatGPT or their software in an unethical way or in a way that violates standards of academic dishonesty. Just need to show on the balance of probabilities that this was done. And while I can't subject and certainly wouldn't want to subject students to a lie detector test, if you are interested in going into policing or CSIS and other areas of the criminal justice and criminal legal system, you need to keep in mind that some of these fields require employees to take a lie detector test. And they might ask about these sorts of things about academic misconduct. And so maybe you won't get punished here, but you could get punished down the road. Since I'm doing this talk and taking the time to explain how AI can be used ethically and unethically, I will not consider ignorance of rules as an excuse. It's your responsibility to make yourself sort of aware of the rules. So you can use ChatGPT in my classes, and you can use them both in ethical ways and in unethical ways. And if I find that they're sort of violating some of the academic misconduct or dishonesty standards that I've set forth, then that's something that I would put forward to SFU for potentially further punishment. But it's not just a problem with using ChatGPT and then maybe there being some sort of academic integrity punishment down the road. I also think that if students don't use ChatGPT in a thoughtful or reflective way, then you'll fail to basically complete assignment criteria precisely. ChatGPT isn't necessarily designed to answer the questions, the sorts of critical thinking that I'll expect from students. And I'll show you how relying on ChatGPT can actually steer you wrong and get you kind of in trouble, and not in trouble, but you'll probably get a lower grade because you won't complete the assignment accurately. Just because you've got words on the page and just because those words make sense doesn't mean that you've completed the assignment criteria correctly. I also just think that in general, if you're not using ChatGPT thoughtfully and you're just using ChatGPT to kind of spew out words that you can use to fulfill word count criteria, you're just not going to be prepared to do other assignments or other courses. You won't be as prepared for quizzes or final exams that might come about in other courses. And just not be prepared for life and expectations about integrity and working hard. I also think that it's important for students, however you think, that you develop your own ideas and your own thoughts about things. And it'll be very difficult for you to develop those opinions and have a self-identity and have your own sort of philosophy or view on life and on key themes in the criminal justice system if you just let ChatGPT do the work for you. And university is just kind of a great time to also develop a sense of self-identity, who you are and how you think about the world. And if you rely on ChatGPT, you're never going to develop that sense of identity. So, what are some of the principles that I consider as being important when we talk about use of AI in my classes? So one is I expect students to be transparent. So that means properly cited and otherwise declared. And at the end of this presentation, I'll kind of give some examples of how you can properly cite ChatGPT and other software. What you might also want to do, and what I strongly recommend students do in Crim 103 and 210, is include in an appendix for your essay or term paper a description of the prompts you use to help write the essay. I'll give you some examples of some prompts you can use, for example, to help improve your writing style in ways that would help you avoid getting into trouble with any sort of concerns about plagiarism or other sorts of academic integrity issues. I think it's also very important to be reflective to avoid repeating false or irrelevant information and to verify what ChatGPT says. You can ask ChatGPT not just for information, but to give you the sources that they relied upon for that information. And then you can go and verify that information in those exact sources. So then you wouldn't necessarily need to cite ChatGPT. You can go and read the primary source. It's just like, for example, going to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not an academic resource, although it can certainly include academic information. But when you find, maybe you're on Wikipedia and you're reading about psychopathy, where you can actually go to the footnotes in Wikipedia to find the source and then go to that original source, read that source, and make sure that Wikipedia has got it right. ChatGPT, again, has been known to make up non-existent sources. I had one student who did this. They basically created fabricated sources and weren't able to retrieve any of the information. And this resulted in an academic dishonesty case against them. So reflect, think about what ChatGPT is saying, and then take the steps or the effort to go and verify that that information is in fact accurate. And then what I think is maybe the most important principle is having some intentionality and active engagement when it comes to thinking about the material produced by ChatGPT. So it's not just about thinking about what ChatGPT tells you, it's also thinking about what you want to accomplish and what you want to put into ChatGPT as a prompt and engage with the output. I'll provide examples of how you don't just have to stop at one prompt. You can continue to ask ChatGPT questions to engage with the output and get clarity about things. It's what I want students to develop is an ability to learn and not just complete tasks. I don't want you just writing things into ChatGPT so that you can complete one section of the assignment and then move on and try and complete the next section of the assignment. It's not about task completing, it's about learning. And it's about developing a good writing style. It's about developing skills for professionalism and work ethic and knowledge and sort of developing those soft skills that will be really important in the workforce when you're required to engage in critical thinking. So all of these things I think are kind of part of my core like values or philosophies about using ChatGPT. And I use ChatGPT, and one of the things that I use it for often is to help me write code when it comes to running statistical analyses. But I don't just throw the code in there and just hope that it works or anything like that. I make sure that the code that is providing me actually makes sense and is actually going to help me run the analyses that I do in fact want to run. So this is a AI assessment scale that provides an overview of different sorts of philosophies that different instructors might have about when AI can be used and not used. And I think sort of where I fit is between a 2 and 3, where you can use AI for things like planning, idea development. You can even use it to help refine and evaluate your work. But what I want you to be doing is critically evaluating any AI generated content you use, modifying it to make sure it's fitting the structure of the work that you're actually doing. Just like when we take a quote from a book, we don't, as part of APA formatting, is we don't just drop that quote right into our paper. We try to make that information from that book fit the context of the paragraph or sentence that we're writing. So we don't just use a direct quote, we reshape the quote to actually fit the context that we're talking about. And so I'll sort of provide some examples of how we would sort of use AI for planning and collaboration. So especially in Crim 103 and Crim 210, you'll know from my week 1 lecture that learning how to read empirical papers is a really important part of this class. And ChatGPT can be used to summarize empirical papers. But the problem with ChatGPT is that it doesn't necessarily summarize empirical papers in the manner that is necessary to get a good grade on course assignments. So, for example, with the Crim 103 annotated bibliography, you need to identify and pull out of a paper very specific information about research questions, sample, procedures, and measures. If you just ask ChatGPT to summarize an empirical paper, it might not provide you with what is actually important in that paper. So you're more than welcome to use ChatGPT to provide summaries of papers that you're reading, but just know that providing a summary of what has been read or what paper you're looking at might not allow you to effectively complete assignment criteria. It might give you a good summary, but that's not necessarily going to give you the information you need to address assignment criteria. And so throughout this little mini talk, I've got some sort of examples of what would be like acceptable or unacceptable or potentially acceptable forms of using ChatGPT. So you can see here examples of how ChatGPT could be used as a reading aid. And before you worry, don't worry, I'm going to include my slides in our module section on Canvas or under files in Canvas so that you'll be able to easily retrieve this information. So I want to give you like an exact example of how psychopathy might actually not necessarily be accurately described if you were to use ChatGPT. So you can see on the left side of the screen here, I've put in a prompt of what is the definition of psychopathy? And then to the right, you get an outline of core features of psychopathy. And in reality, this is actually inaccurate, especially at the very bottom there. So what ChatGPT, oh my goodness, has done is just take the 20 items or so from the psychopathy checklist and regurgitated them. And if you spend a lot of time reading the psychopathy literature, you would understand that there's a difference between conceptualizations or definitions of psychopathy and measures of psychopathy. So what they've listed there as the core features of psychopathy is actually just a measurement tool. It is not a definition of psychopathy. So there's one example of why this is already wrong right off the bat. And when we look down at antisocial traits, they've got poor behavioral controls, early behavioral problems, and on and on. There is probably no greater debate about the definition of psychopathy than when it comes to antisocial traits. And now most scholars would actually agree that antisocial traits do not form the basis of psychopathy. They are an outcome rather than a trait or feature of psychopathy. So once again, ChatGPT is getting it wrong. And in fact, like we can actually empirically verify this. So there have been studies like by Verschwer et al. In 2018. Even in my own work, what we've identified is that the core features of psychopathy very rarely include antisocial and criminal behavior outcomes. So this is one example of how ChatGPT gets things wrong and why you need to kind of do further reading. Now, you can also see that it talks about a distinction between psychopathy and sociopathy. They say that they're used interchangeably, but psychopathy is more clinical and research-based, while sociopathy is more colloquial and tied to social or environmental clues. Here again, we see no source provided. Is kind of a contradiction to say that sociopathy is tied to social environmental causes because in fact researchers doesn't even really acknowledge sociopathy as a disorder. It's as ChatGPT also acknowledged, a colloquial term, which kind of just means like a cliche or something that's used in general society but not really used in research terms. So if we're not researching sociopathy, we actually can't figure out if it's tied to social or environmental causes. To be frank, the term sociopathy in the 21st century is really just a bunch of bullshit. It's used in popular culture and media, but go ahead and go on Google Scholar and search sociopathy, and you'll basically find nothing on it. We have dozens of measures of psychopathy. There's not a single measure of sociopathy that I'm aware of. You can see down here below, we've got a distinction between psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. And one of the ways to sort of help digest my slides, when I've got things highlighted in red, it means that it's kind of flat out wrong. If I've got things highlighted in green, it's because I believe that they are accurate or acceptable. And when I've got things highlighted in yellow, kind of just means like we should have a little bit of caution in interpreting this. Uh, so again, they didn't provide any source for the difference between psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. They are, though, accurate that psychopathy is a little bit narrower if they mean that it captures a smaller group of people. But you could also actually argue that psychopathy is a bit broader because it includes a greater number of constructs or different types of traits. Antisocial personality disorder focuses mainly on violations of social norms and criminal behavior. So in that sense, it's narrower. Antisocial personality disorder is not considering things like affective traits or interpersonal traits or lifestyle traits. So again, like it's spitting out information, but it's not really being helpful. On the left here, we can also see a contradiction where here it says psychopathy is a personality disorder, blah, 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 blah. Then it says it is not officially recognized as a separate diagnosis in the DSM-5. But then when you look at some of the other things that ChatGPT says, it in fact says that psychopathy is a personality disorder. Like the first part of the sentence says psychopathy is a personality disorder. Then it says it's not officially recognized as a separate diagnosis in the DSM-5. So it's saying it's not a disorder, or it is a disorder, but it's not a diagnosis. So what we can do is we don't have to just stop there and think, oh, ChatGPT is useless. Remember, keep in mind those principles about being reflective. We can do a couple of different things. So I noted that they didn't provide sources for their information. So I asked, could you provide references to peer-reviewed papers that support the information you just provided? And then on the right, you provide a whole bunch of different sources that you can go and retrieve. And at the so let's see if I can turn on my annotation button here. These little grayed out links there, you can actually click on them in ChatGPT and they'll take you to the paper in question. I also said, how come? You said that psychopathy is not recognized as an official diagnosis, but you offered to explain to me how psychopathy is diagnosed. So if we go back here, it says at the bottom, do you want me to explain how psychopathy is measured and diagnosed? But then they also said above that it's not officially recognized as a separate diagnosis in the DSM-5. So I asked for clarification, and they actually provided me with some accurate clarification that there's no standalone diagnosis of psychopathy, but the closest category is antisocial personality disorder. So it's assessed, but it's not really diagnosed. And ChatGPT even says, so when I said diagnosed, I should have been more precise. Psychopathy can be assessed or measured, but not officially diagnosed the way depression or schizophrenia can be. So that's all accurate. And maybe you could ask ChatGPT to provide you with some sources for that information. I'm writing a book that a couple of chapters sort of cover the evolution of psychopathy definitions, and it in fact was once upon a time kind of included in the DSM, and they wanted to simplify the measurement of psychopathy, and that's why the antisocial personality disorder diagnosis came in to sort of be a placeholder for psychopathy. It was a little bit simpler to measure by only focusing on behavioral patterns. But you wouldn't know all of this without first having read the literature. So kind of I knew that this was wrong because I already had kind of an understanding of the literature. If you don't take the time to read these sources, you might just accept this information as fact, which is again why we need to be reflective about things. I also think that ChatGPT can be great as a writing aid. Acceptable examples are when a student gives ChatGPT a writing prompt. They use as examples to spur their own brainstorming, perfectly fine. Or when you use a writing prompt to generate ideas of a thesis statement, and then you use that to sort of kick off what you would like to focus on. I don't think this is really much different from talking to a friend, family member, TA, or university professor or instructor about what you might write for a term paper topic. It's okay to use these sort of ideas to kick off your own, like use prompts to kick off your own thesis topics. But ChatGPT doesn't necessarily know in Crim 103 what an acceptable topic might be. So you have to be careful if it's generating you a thesis statement that doesn't really address assignment criteria, then you could get into a little bit of trouble and just like not fulfilling assignment criteria. So I give another example of how a student gives ChatGPT a paragraph they wrote and asks it to provide illustrative examples to support their argument. And then you add that into the draft of your paper. So did you just copy and paste into ChatGPT, or do you think about whether the examples actually fit? Are they actually helping you write your assignment and fulfill assignment criteria? If you just use what ChatGPT tells you, that's no different from copying from any other source. So how much work are you doing, or what were you doing to ensure ChatGPT output fits the context of your own work? Are you looking at what they said, thinking, oh, that's accurate, but how do I make it reflect the arguments that I'm trying to make in my own paper? And I'll give some examples of how we can sort of be steered in the wrong direction if we don't think reflectively about this. So here's kind of a good example where let's say you're a Crim 210 student, and this might be essay number 2 or essay number 3 theme. You might want to know about whether the youth crime rate in Canada has increased. So the ChatGPT notes that yes, it has risen over the last couple of years, the second consecutive annual rise after a long period of decline. And this is what I really appreciate about ChatGPT is that it's contextualizing this information and providing you with sources. So you can see a link to Stats Canada. So you don't need to cite ChatGPT. You can go to Stats Canada and you can actually look at the figures themselves, and they actually have charts for you to look at. And you can look beyond just 2022 and 2023. You can look, maybe you want to look at the start of the YCGA in 2003 and compare over the last 20 years. I also appreciate that it's giving you some contextualization, saying like, hey, well, we've seen 2 decades of declining youth crime rate, and then it's risen in the last 2 years, but we're not getting back to like pre-YCGA crime rate levels. So it's, for example, not sensationalizing things or just saying that the crime rates have rose 2 consecutive years, saying, well, yeah, we've had a long period of decline, and students can kind of go and see that. You can see that if it's been almost 2 decades of steady declines, I think in the last pre-pandemic, there were maybe 3 or 4 years where there was an increase, but between 2003 and 2019, 2020, for the most part, each year over year, there was a decline in the rate of arrests of youth per UCR data. So again, this is useful. This is a good way to kind of kick things off if you want to kind of talk about policies or procedures for dealing with youth crime in Canada. So this is an example that's a little bit more specific to Crim 103 papers. So for example, when I talked about ChatGPT as a writing aid, and I talked about using examples from ChatGPT to generate a draft, I know that it depends on what ChatGPT says. And let's say you decided to focus your term paper on Richard Ramirez. And you might ask ChatGPT, what is important to know about Richard Ramirez? Well, it'll give you a lot of background information that's really not relevant to the Crim 103 assignment. I'll talk about in Crim 103 the instructions for writing the paper, that you're not writing a biography. There have been dozens, hundreds of YouTube videos alone on Richard Ramirez. There's not anything new that you can really say. Your job isn't to see if you can find facts about Richard Ramirez. Your job in Crim 103 is to take different theoretical perspectives or mental health disorders and examine the extent to which they do or do not apply to Richard Ramirez. So, a classic or common mistake that students make in Crim 103 is just kind of like focusing way too much, writing page over page that's kind of reads like, oh, Richard Ramirez Wikipedia page, talking about, when he got the death penalty and what type of death penalty he received and who his lawyer was or how many lawyers he had. None of this information is relevant to the Crim 103 assignment. We're not talking about, this isn't Crim 355. We're not looking at fingerprints. I don't care that he was captured by residents in East LA in August 1985. This is not relevant to your assignment. You can see below some information that might be relevant. So let's say you picked psychopathy as one of the mental health disorders to apply to Ramirez. Well, you can see below that he noted that, or ChatGPT notes that he often showed no remorse during the trial while he was in court. Okay, how did he show no remorse? Were they saying that it was just because he smiled or laughed? We might need a little bit more to go on. What were some examples of how Ramirez showed no remorse? So maybe this would be an opportunity for you to ask ChatGPT more information, ask them for sources on people who have written on how Ramirez showed no remorse. Ask for examples that Ramirez might have displayed that indicated examples of lacking remorse. So again, it's that follow-up, that being reflective, thinking about what's being provided, asking more, digging deeper. Because if you in Crim 103 just say that Richard Ramirez was a quote-unquote psychopath because he showed no remorse, and remorse is a trait of psychopathy, that's going to basically give you no marks. You need to provide evidence of like the definition of remorse. What are some examples of remorse according to the psychopathy literature? And what are some examples of ways that Ramirez showed a lack of remorse that would align with the literature's definition of a lack of remorse? And same thing at the bottom, Crim 103, we don't need to know that he was convicted on 43 charges because that's not the point of the assignment. Using ChatGPT as an editing aid. Again, it's sort of based on whether asking yourself whether you're making your writing cleaner or are you making it different. Are you using ChatGPT to help proofread your assignment, or is it your co-author who is adding new detail to your assignment and making your words different? Basically altering the meaning of what you're saying or adding in information. And so what you can do if you want to use ChatGPT or Grammarly or other software in an ethical way, use an editing aid prompt. And so you'll be able to copy and paste this from my slides. But here's what I would add to ChatGPT to kind of say, like, maybe you're going to put in a paragraph to get some feedback on your writing style. You can put this information in to make sure that ChatGPT doesn't add new sources or add more details that ChatGPT pulled from the internet to try and punch up what you were saying. You can ask them to highlight in bold the changes that were made by ChatGPT so that you can verify them, or that you can add to an appendix or include in a log so that you can show that you were not using ChatGPT in a way to basically write your paper for you. So here's an example of how you could use ChatGPT in a helpful or effective and ethical way. So you could just put in a sentence like, or put in a prompt, is the following sentence grammatically correct? Psychopathy is expected to increase the likelihood of recidivism by double. And what I like about this is ChatGPT isn't just fixing the mistake, it's explaining why this might be a mistake. And then providing examples of ways to rewrite the sentence without actually changing the meaning or adding new information. And sort of one of the last things I'll talk about, and you can find all of this information online, but just ways to cite APA or cite, excuse me, ChatGPT in APA format, both in text citations and in your reference list. Again, because we've got the slides, I won't stay on this for too long. But again, we're all still learning, including me. Like this is sort of uncharted territory for me. But my recommendations to students are always to be transparent, use common sense, make sure that you're creating your own ideas. And I don't have it written here, but maybe most importantly, just ask. Like ask me, ask your TA. Be sort of forthcoming about what you're doing before you submit your assignment so we can kind of give you some feedback on whether this is a use of ChatGPT that would fall within the boundaries of appropriate use and not result in any concerns about academic dishonesty or academic integrity. So thanks for listening to this video, and I hope you have a great time writing these assignments, because I do think it can be fun to learn new things. I think that's why, a major reason why we go to university is to learn, not just facts, but skills. You're not going to develop writing skills, and you're not going to develop critical thinking skills if you let other software do the work for you. All right, have a good rest of your week. Take care, everyone.